The View studio had seen it all. 27 years of political fireworks, celebrity meltdowns, and moments that ricocheted across the internet within seconds. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared anyone for what happened on that unremarkable Tuesday morning when two of the most famous women in the world sat down on the same couch. What was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance turned into 17 minutes of television so uncomfortable, so brutally honest, that it would be dissected for years to come. One woman arrived expecting sympathetic questions and supportive nods. The other arrived expecting to discuss her humanitarian documentary. Neither expected to become enemies before the first commercial break. And when the dust settled, when the cameras stopped rolling, and when one of them stormed off stage in front of a stunned live audience, 3 words would be replayed over 50 million times across every platform imaginable. 3 words that exposed something far more significant than a celebrity feud. 3 words that drew a line between advocacy and performance, between substance and spectacle, between those who do the work and those who simply talk about it. This is the story of what really happened on The View. The studio buzzed with that particular electricity that only comes when producers know they've struck gold. 2 A-list guests on the same episode was rare enough to cause a stir. But Meghan Markle and Angelina Jolie, together on the same couch, sharing the same space, the producers had practically been high-fiving backstage. Both women were advocates for humanitarian causes. Both had navigated the treacherous waters of intense media scrutiny. Both had complicated family histories that had played out in the most public ways imaginable. The hosts took their positions with practiced ease. Whoopi Goldberg anchored from her usual spot, flanked by Joy Behar, Sunny Hostin, Sarah Haynes, and Ana Navarro. The audience applauded as first Meghan, then Angelina, walked out and settled onto the guest couch. Both women smiled. Both looked relaxed. Both projected the polished composure that came from years of being watched. "Welcome." Whoopi's voice carried its usual warmth across the studio. "We've got 2 incredible women here today. Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, here to talk about Archewell's mental health initiatives, and Angelina Jolie, here to discuss her new documentary on global displacement. Ladies, thank you for being here." The camera lights flickered. The audience settled in. Nobody in that room had any idea they were about to witness something that would define both women's public narratives for years to come. "Meghan, let's start with you," Joy Behar said, leaning forward with genuine curiosity. "Archewell has been doing a lot of work around mental health awareness. Tell us what's driving that." Meghan turned to face the hosts, her posture perfect, her smile radiant. She had done this dance before. The friendly interview, the sympathetic questions, the opportunity to shape her narrative. It was familiar territory. "Mental health is deeply personal to me," Meghan began, her voice smooth and practiced. "I've been open about my own struggles, and I believe that by sharing our stories, we create space for others to seek help. Real advocacy means using your platform to genuinely connect with people who are suffering, not just showing up for photo opportunities." The comment hung in the air. It seemed innocuous enough, a standard talking point about authenticity and impact. But something shifted. Angelina's head turned slightly, her eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly. The movement was subtle, barely noticeable to anyone not watching closely. But the cameras caught everything. "That's wonderful," Sunny said, moving the conversation along. "Angelina, you've also been involved in advocacy work for decades. How do you approach? Can I just respond to something?" Angelina's voice cut through the pleasantries like a blade through silk. Calm, measured, utterly composed. But there was something underneath it. Something that made the temperature in the room drop by several degrees. The hosts exchanged glances. This wasn't in the script. "I'm curious," Angelina continued, her eyes fixed on Meghan with an intensity that made the Duchess shift slightly in her seat. "What distinguishes real advocacy from photo opportunities? Because in my experience, the line isn't always as clear as people suggest." The question was polite. The implication was devastating. Meghan's smile flickered, a tiny crack in the carefully constructed facade. I just mean that genuine advocacy requires sustained commitment, she said, her voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there moments before. Not just showing up when cameras are present. I've spent 23 years working with refugees, Angelina said, her tone still perfectly even. I've been to Syria during active conflict. I've held dying children in camps where no cameras existed. Are you suggesting there's something inauthentic about that work? The studio had gone very, very quiet. Even the shuffling of papers had stopped. I wasn't referring to you specifically. Then who were you referring to? The air between them had become something physical. A pressure that everyone in the room could feel pressing against their chests. The host sat frozen, their carefully prepared questions suddenly irrelevant. Whoopi leaned forward, her voice carrying a note of gentle warning. Ladies, I think we're all on the same team here. I'm just asking a clarifying question, Angelina said, her eyes never leaving Meghan's face. Because photo opportunities is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot. Usually by people who've done less work, trying to diminish people who've done more. Meghan's composure held, but something hardened behind her eyes. Her hands, resting in her lap, had curled into fists that she was trying very hard to keep still. I've done extensive work through our foundation, she said, her voice straining to maintain its measured tone. Mental health awareness, veteran support, women's empowerment. For how long? The question was simple. The implication was devastating. Since we established Archwell, Meghan said. Which was when? 2020, yes. But my advocacy work began long before that. It was barely a whisper, but the cameras caught it, the first genuine crack in the facade. Doing what specifically? Angelina pressed, leaning forward slightly. Because I'm genuinely curious. Before you married Harry, what humanitarian work were you doing? The audience was frozen. The hosts exchanged glances of growing alarm. This was rapidly becoming something none of them could control. Meghan's face flushed, a deep red creeping up from her neck. I was a global ambassador for World Vision. You spoke at the UN once in 2015 about gender equality and education. It was a 7-minute speech. Are you keeping track? I've testified before the UN Security Council multiple times. I've briefed Congress. I've met with heads of state in active war zones. Angelina's voice remained perfectly calm, perfectly reasonable, which somehow made it even more devastating. I'm not saying this to diminish your speech. I'm asking why you're implying that other people's decades of work are photo opportunities. The camera lights seemed to flicker. Or maybe it was just the tension crackling through the room, making everything feel slightly unreal. I think what Meghan was saying. Joy tried to intervene. I can speak for myself. Meghan's voice snapped with sudden sharpness, then softened again. Forced softness that didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm sorry. I wasn't making a comparison. I was speaking generally about the difference between performative activism and genuine engagement. And how do you measure the difference? By impact, by sustained commitment, by whether the work continues when the cameras stop. Angelina nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. My documentary follows 3 refugee families over 7 years. No publicity, no fanfare, just documentation of their journeys. The cameras stopped for most of that time. The work continued. She paused, letting the words sink in. Does that qualify as genuine engagement? Or should I check with you first?
Sarah n'attemptait agente l'intervention.
I think we can all agree that both of you are doing important work. Can we? Angelina turned toward the hosts, her composure finally showing the faintest crack. Because I didn't come here to have my 23 years of humanitarian service implied away by someone who started 3 years ago. The words landed like a physical blow. Meghan's face went pale, then red again. I have enormous respect for anyone who uses their platform for good, Angelina continued. But respect is earned through work, not through press releases about work. You don't know anything about what I've done, Meghan said, her voice trembling with barely controlled anger. Then tell me. Angelina leaned forward, her hands folded in her lap, the picture of calm inquiry. Specifically, name one policy that changed because of Archwell. Name one refugee you've personally helped resettle. Name one concrete outcome beyond raising awareness. Meghan opened her mouth, closed it. The silence stretched out, unbearable, as the cameras captured every agonizing second. Awareness matters, she finally said. Changing the conversation matters. Changing the conversation is what people say when they haven't changed anything else. The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. The audience made a collective sound, something between a gasp and a murmur of recognition. Whoopi's face showed genuine distress. "Let's take a commercial break," she said, her voice carrying an urgency that her practiced composure couldn't quite mask.
No.
Meghan's voice was sharp, cutting through the tension like broken glass. "I'm not going to let that stand. You don't know what I've been through," Meghan said, her voice rising. "You don't know what I've sacrificed." "Sacrificed for what? For who?" Angelina's voice remained calm, almost gentle, which somehow made it more devastating. "Name them. For my family. For my sanity. For my. Those are sacrifices for yourself." Angelina's eyes never wavered. "I'm asking what you've sacrificed for others. There's a difference." Ana Navarro, who had been unusually quiet throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. "Angelina, I think Meghan has faced genuine hardships. The media scrutiny, the institutional. I don't doubt her hardships." Angelina turned toward Ana, her expression softening slightly. "I'm questioning her positioning as an authority on authentic advocacy when her primary advocacy has been for herself and her husband. That's not criticism. It's observation." Meghan stood up abruptly, then sat back down. The false start betrayed her agitation, the carefully cultivated composure finally cracking. "This is exactly what happens," she said, her voice trembling. "Every time I try to do something positive, someone tears it down. First the tabloids, now you. I'm not the tabloids." Angelina's voice carried a note of something approaching pity. "I'm sitting right here asking you direct questions which you're not answering. The tabloids print rumors and speculation. I'm asking about verifiable facts. Those are different things. You're attacking me. I'm questioning you. If you can't tell the difference, that says something about how often you've been genuinely questioned." Meghan's face had gone red, the careful mask of composure completely shattered. "I don't have to sit here and be interrogated." "No, you don't." Angelina's voice remained calm, almost kind. "You can leave whenever you want. But if you do, you're proving exactly what I'm suggesting. That when faced with actual scrutiny instead of sympathetic platforms, you retreat. That's not fair." "What's not fair?" "I've answered hard questions for 23 years about my relationship with my father, about my marriage, about every controversial choice I've ever made. I've sat in hostile interviews and engaged. You're in a friendly environment with hosts who want to support you, and you're calling basic questions an attack." Whoopi tried once more, her voice carrying a note of pleading. "Ladies, I really think we should. Let me ask you something." Angelina's focus returned entirely to Meghan. "You've talked a lot about wanting to be known for your work rather than your title. What's the work specifically? The Archwell Foundation. What has it accomplished? Concrete outcomes. Not initiatives, not awareness campaigns. What's actually different in the world because of your foundation?" Meghan's jaw worked, muscles tensing beneath the skin. "We've partnered with organizations addressing mental health access." "Partnered how? Funding on-the-ground work? Or lending your name? All of those things. How much funding specifically? Where did it go? What programs exist now that didn't exist before?" The questions came rapid-fire, each one a precision strike. Meghan's composure crumbled further with every syllable. "I don't have those numbers memorized. I have mine memorized because I did the work. I wrote the checks. I visited the programs. I know the names of the children whose education my foundation funded because I've met them. Some of them annually, for over a decade." Angelina's voice softened slightly, the first hint of something approaching compassion entering her tone. I'm not saying you haven't done anything good. I'm saying the gap between your rhetoric about real advocacy and your documented work is significant. And the first person to close that gap should be you, not people who question it. Meghan's eyes had filled with tears. Whether from frustration or genuine hurt, it was impossible to tell. Her hands trembled slightly on her lap. You have no idea what I've been through. You're right. I don't. Angelina's voice was quiet now, almost intimate. But I know what I've been through, and I know what the people I've worked with have been through. Children who watched their parents murdered. Mothers who walked for weeks carrying dying infants. Families who lost everything to wars they didn't start. She paused, letting the weight of the words settle. When you've held those people, when you've heard those stories, when you've spent decades trying to help in whatever small way you can, being lectured about real advocacy by someone whose primary hardship was negative press coverage feels disproportionate. My hardship was not just negative press. I know. I've read about it. You've made sure everyone has read about it. Angelina's voice held no accusation, just simple observation. You've told your story on Oprah, in a documentary, in interviews, through your husband's book. You've been very effective at communicating your suffering. I'm asking what else you've communicated. What have you done for people whose suffering can't be monetized into Netflix deals? The audience shifted uncomfortably. The hosts looked at each other with growing alarm. The cameras captured everything. The tears in Meghan's eyes, the steel in Angelina's gaze, the palpable tension that seemed to fill every corner of the studio. I think, Sunny said carefully, that both perspectives here are valid. Are they? Angelina turned to her. Is complaining about tabloid coverage equivalent to advocating for refugees fleeing genocide? Is being criticized on social media comparable to watching children starve in camps? I'm not saying Meghan hasn't struggled. I'm saying perspective matters. And when someone with her level of privilege lectures about real advocacy, she should expect to be asked what hers looks like. Meghan grabbed her water glass, took a long drink, then set it down too hard. The sound echoed through the silent studio. You've clearly decided who I am, she said, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. Nothing I say will change that. I haven't decided anything. Angelina's voice was impossibly calm. I've asked questions. You've answered some with deflection and others with accusations of attack. That's not me deciding who you are. That's you showing me. I'm showing you someone who's been traumatized by exactly this kind of questioning. Scrutiny. Basic journalism. If those things traumatize you, public life might not be the right fit. Angelina's voice carried no cruelty, just simple, devastating logic. Because the work I do requires facing much harder things than uncomfortable interview questions. You don't understand the pressure. I've been famous since I was 20 years old. I've been followed by paparazzi. I've had my marriage dissected globally. I've been called everything from a home wrecker to a saint. Angelina paused, letting the words sink in. I understand pressure. What I don't understand is treating that pressure as equivalent to actual suffering, and then positioning yourself as an authority on how to help people who are actually suffering. Meghan stood up fully this time, her chair scraping against the floor. I'm not going to sit here and be compared. You made the comparison. Angelina remained seated, her hands folded in her lap, the picture of composed inquiry. You implied that real advocacy was different from photo opportunities. I'm asking you to clarify which side of that line your work falls on. If you can't answer, that's an answer in itself. Joy made one final attempt, her voice carrying a note of desperation. Meghan, please sit down. Angelina, maybe we can find some common ground. I'm happy to find common ground, Angelina said, her voice softening. I think Meghan has a platform that could do enormous good. I think her visibility could help causes that desperately need attention. What I'm resisting is the suggestion that she's already done that work when the evidence suggests she's primarily done publicity for the work. That's incredibly unfair. Meghan was still standing, her body rigid with tension. What's unfair? Angelina's voice remained calm, patient, like a teacher explaining something to a struggling student. I've asked you 3 times for concrete examples. You've given me generalities. If I asked about my work, I could give you names, locations, funding amounts, program outcomes, legislative changes I've personally advocated for. That's not because I'm better than you. It's because I've been doing this for 23 years instead of 3. Time matters. Receipts matter. Authenticity requires both. Authenticity requires receipts. Meghan repeated the phrase bitterly. That's a nice soundbite. Did you practice it?
No.
I practice my testimony for congressional hearings. I practice my presentations for UN briefings. Angelina's voice carried a note of gentle reproach. Sound bites emerge when you've thought about something long enough that clarity becomes natural. You're insufferable, perhaps, but I'm also documented. My work exists in the world beyond press releases. Can you say the same? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Meghan's face contorted, emotions flickering too fast to follow. This is exactly what always happens, she said, her voice cracking. Someone decides I'm the enemy, and nothing I say matters. You're not my enemy. Angelina's voice was quiet now, almost gentle. You're someone I don't know making claims I find questionable. That's not enmity, skepticism. If you can't distinguish between the two, you might want to examine why disagreement feels like attack. Because it's always phrased as disagreement while actually being destruction. I'm not trying to destroy you. I'm asking you to substantiate your claims. If that feels destructive, the problem isn't my questions. It's the fragility of what you've built. Meghan's face contorted, and for a moment, it seemed like she might cry. Then something harder took over. Something that looked very much like the composure of someone who had spent years learning to survive. I don't have to prove anything to you. You're right. You don't. Angelina nodded slowly. But you chose to come on television and talk about your advocacy work. When you do that, questions are part of the package. If you wanted to do the work quietly, you could. You haven't. So the questions follow. I've done more than you know. Then tell me. I've been asking. You've been deflecting. Angelina paused, letting the words sink in. At some point, deflection becomes its own kind of answer. Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the couch. The movement was sudden, sharp, decisive. I'm leaving. Whoopi stood up, her face showing genuine distress. Meghan, please.
No.
Meghan's voice was ice. I came here for a conversation about my foundation work. Instead, I've been attacked by someone who's clearly decided to be my enemy. Angelina remained seated, perfectly composed, her hands folded in her lap. I asked you questions. Every question was relevant to claims you made. If you can't answer questions about your own work, that's not my hostility. It's your lack of preparation. I won't be lectured. Then don't make statements that invite questions. Real advocacy versus photo opportunities is a judgment. Judgments invite responses. If you wanted to discuss your work without scrutiny, you shouldn't have implied that other people's work was inferior. Meghan was already moving toward the exit, her heels clicking against the floor. She stopped at the threshold and turned back, her face a mask of barely controlled emotion. History will vindicate me. Angelina nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. Maybe history will also remember what you actually did versus what you said you were doing. For your sake, I hope those align more than they appear right now. You're cruel. I'm honest. Angelina's voice was quiet, almost sad. They feel the same when you're not used to it. Meghan walked off stage. The sound of her heels echoed through a completely silent studio. The hosts sat frozen, their carefully prepared questions forgotten. The audience watched in stunned silence. The cameras captured everything. The empty space where Meghan had been, the composed figure of Angelina still seated on the couch, the looks of shock on the hosts' faces. Whoopi broke the silence first. Well, that was unexpected. I'm sorry. Angelina's voice carried genuine regret. I didn't come here planning for that. What happened? Joy asked, still looking stunned. I mean, what just happened? She made a comment about real advocacy versus photo opportunities. Angelina's voice was calm, measured, the storm behind her eyes visible only in the faint tension around her mouth. I've spent 23 years in the field. I've lost friends to the work. I've seen things that will never leave me. Being dismissed as someone who does photo opportunities by someone who's primarily done publicity. I couldn't let that stand. You were pretty hard on her, Sarah said carefully. I asked her questions. She couldn't answer them. Angelina paused, her expression softening. That's not me being hard. That's her being unprepared for basic scrutiny. Anna leaned forward, her voice carrying genuine curiosity. But she has been through a lot. The media treatment, the family stuff. I know, and those are real. Angelina's voice carried a note of genuine compassion. But hardship doesn't automatically translate to expertise. Suffering doesn't make you an authority on alleviating other people's suffering. She conflates her personal struggles with humanitarian credentials, and that conflation is worth questioning. Sunny nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. That's actually a fair point. I'm not trying to be unfair. Angelina's voice was quiet now, almost intimate. I'm trying to maintain standards for work that matters. When advocacy becomes branding, people who actually need help get lost in the marketing. The encounter lasted 17 minutes before Meghan walked off. Its impact would last much longer, would ripple across social media, would be dissected in opinion pieces, would become a defining moment in both women's public narratives. For Angelina Jolie, it was a moment that reminded the public why she'd earned respect in the humanitarian space. Not through press releases, not through carefully crafted media appearances, but through decades of documented, verifiable, often dangerous work. She had the receipts and she'd proven it. For Meghan Markle, it was something else entirely. Not a hostile journalist with a predetermined agenda. Not a conservative commentator looking for ratings. Not the tabloid press that had pursued her since the moment she stepped into the royal spotlight. This was another celebrity, another woman, another advocate. Someone whose credibility couldn't be dismissed as bias or jealousy. Angelina Jolie had asked simple questions. Meghan Markle couldn't answer them. And in that gap between claims and evidence, between rhetoric and receipts, the audience saw something that no PR strategy could spin away. Some people talk about advocacy. Others document it. And when those two groups meet on the same couch, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. The camera lights flickered. The audience slowly began to stir. The hosts exchanged glances that said everything about what they were going to be dealing with in the days ahead. And somewhere in the green room, a publicist was already drafting a statement that would try, and fail, to explain what had just happened. What do you think? Angelina asked, her voice carrying a note of genuine curiosity. Was I too harsh? Or did she deserve to be questioned? The hosts exchanged glances again. Nobody seemed quite sure how to answer. I think, Whoopi said carefully, that you made your point, and I think she made hers. Whether anyone was right or wrong, that's going to be up to the viewers to decide. That's fair. Angelina nodded slowly. I just think that when you talk about real advocacy, you should be prepared for someone to ask what that actually means. And if you can't answer, maybe you should think about why. The show continued, but something had shifted. The energy in the studio had changed. The careful production rhythms disrupted by something that felt like real life intruding on carefully crafted television. And when the credits rolled, when the cameras stopped rolling, when the audience filed out into the New York afternoon, the encounter that had just happened would follow everyone out of the studio and into the wider world. Within hours, clips would flood social media. Within days, the confrontation would be analyzed by commentators on every platform. Within weeks, it would become a shorthand for something larger, a moment when two different visions of advocacy collided, when the gap between performance and substance became impossible to ignore. And at the center of it all, three words that Angelina Jolie had spoken in the heat of the moment. Her voice calm and clear. Authenticity requires receipts. The debate raged on. Some called Angelina Jolie cruel, dismissive, unnecessarily harsh. Others called Meghan Markle unprepared, defensive, unwilling to engage with legitimate questions. But beneath the surface of the celebrity feud, something more significant had been exposed. A fault line in how we think about advocacy, about the work that actually changes lives versus the work that changes narratives. Because when you strip away the glamour, the cameras, the carefully curated public images, what remains is a simple question. What have you actually done? Not what have you said you would do. Not what have you promoted. Not what have you raised awareness about. What have you actually, concretely, measurably done? Angelina Jolie had an answer. Meghan Markle didn't. The difference wasn't subtle. The difference was 17 minutes of the most uncomfortable television in daytime history. The difference was a walk-off that would be replayed millions of times. The difference was a cultural moment that exposed something uncomfortable about how we talk about doing good. And as the credits rolled, as the studio lights dimmed, as the publicists rushed to manage the aftermath, one thing was clear. Some people talk about advocacy. Others document it. And when those two groups meet on the same couch, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. What do you think? Was Angelina too harsh? Or did Meghan deserve to be questioned? Who would you want to see on The View next? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video to help it reach more people. Subscribe to our channel for more explosive celebrity moments. Because in the end, the truth is always more compelling than the spin. And sometimes, just sometimes, the cameras capture something that no one could have scripted, no one could have predicted, and no one will ever forget.